Rocky Balboa versus Daniel LaRusso. This matchup is pretty interesting to talk about, as not only are they the underdogs of their respective stories, with Daniel even being called the Rocky to Johnny's Apollo, however, me and Crisis,
hey everyone, Crisis here, thanks Tyler for having me.
Man, you already know, whose channel will be linked in the description, will be talking about who would win with their respective skill set. Unlike my other versus battles, which include things like calcs and big numbers, we aren't going to be doing that here. Instead, we are going to be talking about what's been presented to the whole audience and what most people could get behind, as getting into things like that can be a real headache. And both characters will be in their prime. So for Rocky, he's not going to be an old man or the bum loser from the first movie. We are going to be using Rocky for Rocky, as most people would agree that's prime Rocky. And the script of the movie shows that he still has Apollo style from the third movie, as well as believing himself to be beyond the need for sparring at that point. And as for Daniel, we are going to be using season 5 Cobra Kai, not little kid Daniel, as he would just get thrown through a wall, just for those that need to hear this. With that aside, let's see which underdog comes out on top. Daniel LaRusso was Mr. Miyagi's first ever student. He would teach him both offensive and defensive techniques like the crane kick and the wax on and wax off. It seems as well through his training he learned how to anticipate attacks and move like an untouchable machine when he's focused. Daniel throughout the movies would face and surpass characters like Johnny, Chosen, and Mike Barnes, who are all considered to be prodigies in the martial arts world. Even pre-Karate Kid, Johnny was scrapping with a black belt, and obviously Karate Kid 1 Johnny would be stronger, with Daniel defeating him. Regardless of who you think was stronger at that point, Karate Kid 2 and Karate Kid 3 Daniel both surpassed Johnny, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, back to Chosen and Mike. Chosen is casually folding a group of black belts while training and folds all of KK1 Daniel's tricks. It wasn't until Daniel used the drum technique, which essentially counters while simultaneously attacking the opponent. And even after this, he learns the ways of Terry Silver's Cobra Kai, which is far deadlier than Kreese's. Daniel wouldn't apply this style until later, but it's just something to note for now. Anyways, he would learn kata, which essentially allows him to focus and use the very foundation of his karate to its purest form. And this would allow him to defeat the likes of Mike Barnes, who was already considered a champion pre-Terry training, and then he would go on to get trained by Terry's goon. This is about as far as the skill aspect goes for Daniel. Like, we don't see him fighting the world's greatest fighter on the planet or something, but he does improve in Cobra Kai to a ridiculous degree. He's now able to use Terry's style to his own and is at his absolute peak by the end of the season, since now he isn't just only using Miyagi-Do. And now he has access to the Quicksilver, pressure points, an incomplete two-legged kick, and etc. In terms of stats, I mean, we have Kyler, Tori, Kid Chosen, and Mike Barnes, and adult Johnny all smashing solid stone and bricks, with some struggling more than others, but overall, this puts Daniel in that wall level tier. As for speed, he's able to catch flies, and we have characters like Miguel reacting to a speeding baseball machine in his sleep, not literally, but you know what I mean, roughly capping their speed in the subsonic range, which is the best you're honestly going to get, like, until we see Daniel like catching bullets or something.
History, with Apollo technically being even better than Ali based on statements and his renown in the Rocky universe, which Ali is canon to. Even in Creed 3, we see that the Rumble in the Jungle happened, which is one of Muhammad Ali's more famous fights. Rocky, majority of them, but also wrote every Rambo movie and directed the 4th film. So this statement is pretty definitive as far as author statements are concerned. Rambo being a master martial artist, the perfect killing machine, and was stated by his military commander to be the best fighter, point blank, just fighting in general, all styles concerned. Rambo is just called the best fighter with his hands. As far as Rocky's stats, he too would be wall level based on Ivan Drago's 2,150 PSI punches, which Rocky endures many times, obviously. With that Rambo scaling in mind, with Rocky stated to be able to obviously keep up with Rambo in combat, likely dodging his attacks or just tagging the soldier, he would be in the range of bullet timing, as John Rambo was shown outpacing helicopter fire, calculated to be within those ranges. Or even supersonic, as Rambo pretty clearly dodges assault rifle fire in his first movie.
Like what was said in the beginning, in terms of stats, they should be comparable to one another, making this match come down to skill. Now, we know that Mr. Miyagi is by far the GOAT of the Miyagi Verse, yet has never been claimed to be one of the best on the planet. In fact, no one in Cobra Kai really has a statement like this, yet Rocky by his first movie is trading blows with someone who's considered to be the best in the world. Daniel has applied Miyagi Fang to its fullest form, however Rocky has combined multiple styles that all upscale from Apollo's form plus Creed's own style and can switch between these constantly. Daniel's anticipation anticipation in combination with his pressure points could pose a threat to Rocky. However, we've seen Johnny beat Daniel even with his arm incapacitated through sheer relentlessness. With 1.
Anticipation wouldn't be too big of a problem either, since it's implied boxers do read muscle fibers in fights in real life. Funny enough, this was stated by Mike Tyson, who at the very least should be in the same conversation as Ali, who Apollo, like explained before, upscales above, being possibly the #1 fighter in the Rocky universe as of 2015. With Ali's career, as explained before, being canon to the Rocky universe, meaning Apollo is just better than Ali. The best skill thing, kinda, for Cobra Kai is Miyagi being a war hero. He's pretty much the best fighter in the series, and that's all the lore that we have for him, which would kinda make him a worse Rambo, who's implied to be relative to Rocky by the writer of both series. Even if you want to look at it from a non-fictional standpoint, a person who's well-versed in boxing would typically overwhelm someone who's well-versed in karate. Ramsey Dewey, a pro fighter and trainer, has a video about this. Basically, karate in most of its forms isn't going to involve the same high stress / high damage situations lasting 12 to 15 rounds as boxing has. He explains that the point scoring system of karate leaves those fighters less mentally conditioned for brutality, whereas someone like Rocky especially is very used to fighting these types of wars. There are some karate goats in the UFC, sure, but that person would have the experience of brutal combat sports as opposed to most in real life karate practitioners, as well as Daniel in this instance. Cobra Kai even backs this up, since Daniel, who's practically Johnny's equal, gets folded by someone proficient in the UFC.
Even just comparing the training regimens both characters went through, we have Daniel's most rigorous training being climbing chains and breaking wood and maybe stone.
Meanwhile, Rocky's uppercutting cow rib cages, breaking them, chopping logs, climbing mountains. You can pretty clearly see the difference here.
Daniel, I feel like initially would try and test the waters, see what Rocky's style is about, but would soon see he's going to need more than defense to win. Most of the initial strikes wouldn't do much, leading into him using his pressure points.
These would catch Rocky by surprise, 100%, but he's dealt with far worse and would just continue to fight Daniel, switching from taking Daniel's attacks and seemingly being unstoppable, to applying his southpaw and Apollo Creed's speed to confuse and overwhelm the karate man-child.
With this, Daniel would start to panic and perhaps attempt the two-legged kick out of desperation, leaving him wide open for Rocky to throw a combination, or he just falls on his head, and now Daniel LaRusso is more than likely in a coma. And in conclusion, even if we are just talking about pure skill, Daniel has no chance in beating Rocky. Also, thanks Crisis once again for hopping on the channel and helping me out with the Rocky section of the video.
Of course, anytime. Thanks for having me, Ty.
Man, you know I got you, man. Seriously though, guys, go and sub to Crisis. His channel will be linked in the description. He not only drops Rocky power scaling content, but also stuff like comics, video games, etc. Go and check him out. You'll love his stuff. And be sure to subscribe to this channel if you're new to the channel. And have a nice rest of the day, everybody.